the constituency, Philip Basua. Now, Philip Basua died on the 27th of March, 2023. And of course, the Electoral Commission, or his death was announced or confirmed by the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin. And for that matter, the Electoral Commission went ahead to announce a date for a by-election. And this date happens to be today, the 23rd of May, 2023. Now, Philip Basua had been a Member of Parliament for the Kumawu constituency since 2016. He went on to retain the seat for the NPP in the 2020 elections and has been MP since until his untimely demise. By-election kick-started in the early hours of today. Voting has been going on in our bulletins throughout the day. We've brought you some updates and some details with respect to what has transpired since morning until now. Now we're stationed, and of course we'll be crossing over to Kumawu to bring you some more updates, some more details, some particulars with respect to that by-election in that particular constituency. But here in studio with me, my colleague Hansen Ajiman is here. You must have seen and heard him since morning, dishing out some information with respect to that by-election. Many thanks to you again for joining us, Hansen.
Thank you, Nana.
Good to have you. And then, of course, to my right is the Executive Director of Global Info Analytics, Musa Dankwa. Thank you for joining us as well, sir.
It's my pleasure.
You're welcome. All right, so we'll be going straight into the elections, the by-election in Kumawu and what has transpired so far. But let's kick off the conversation from, the representation we've seen in Kumawu today, especially on the sides of the two big parties, the MPP and the NDC. I want to start with you, Musa. How important do you think this election is to the two parties? Because, this would have gone down as an ordinary by-election, especially a simple one for a seat that to a large extent is believed to be a safe haven for one of the two parties. Is this a precursor to 2024?
I think it will be a precursor to 2024, especially in the MPP strongholds. What happens today in Kumawu will tell us what might happen in 2024, especially with the margins we're looking to see today. But with regards to its importance, I think it is more important to MPP than NDC.
Right. How so?
Because look, if NDC should flip this seat, that hell will break loose.
Really?
Because MPP will then probably lose their majority in Parliament.
Clearly. Well.
And that is a stake that they
But then there's also Asin North to go on.
No, if you can't hold Kumawu, then forget Asin North. You can't hold.
Especially when Asin North was previously held by the NDC.
Absolutely, absolutely. And being a swing region, the things that went on in Kumawu cannot happen in Asin North without repercussions. So it's a completely different thing. If they can't hold Kumawu today, then nowhere else is safe for them.
I'll come back to you on this because you have done some work
Yes.
on Kumawu with respect to predictions and all that. But let me go to Hansen. The names the faces we've seen in Kumawu today really underscores how important it is for them. But the roles they are playing is what I want you to touch on. We've seen someone in the caliber of Samuel Okujeto Ablakwa acting as a polling station agent.
I can describe it as the creme de la creme of political gathering. I mean, the president was there, the vice president
was there.
Almost all the candidates seeking to lead the NPP were there. Former President John Dramani Mahama was there, Dr. Dofo Kojo Bonsu. Today, almost all the bigwigs in the political parties are Asidin Ketia, the national chairman of the NDC, is there. His deputy, Fififi Abikwete, is there. If you go to the NPP, Stephen Ntim, he's there. His general secretary in the person of Justin Kodia Frimpong is there. You seem not to be seeing the regional executives doing the work. I mean, this is a constituency election, and usually constituency elections, you would most likely leave it to the constituency executives with support from regional executives to do it. But it's as though this election has been taken by the national executives and even persons who are known at the national level amongst the various political parties, because former Attorney General Betty Mode Idrusu is in the constituency, and when the issues came up about the declaration form that had been signed earlier, she was one of the people who were engaging the officers of the Electoral Commission. And it tells you how important this election is to both parties. I was in Ayawaso West Wogon in 2018. Even though we talked about the tensions, we talked about the interest in the Ayawaso West Wogon election, until the incident at Collation happened, you didn't see any of the national officers. We only saw the then chairman of the NDC, Samuel Ofosu Ampofo, who came to declare that the NDC was withdrawing from the race. But the work predominantly was done by the constituency executives, and you didn't even see much of the national executives. You see some MPs like Samuel Kujetu Ablakwa. It tells you, on the face value of the pictures we are seeing from the constituency, it's very clear. Stakes are high. We'll go later into why the stakes are high, but we've established it, as Doc has already indicated. The numbers, now there's a turnout to fight over. There's 136 of the NDC technically, 136 or 137, let's say 136 of the MPP plus one independent, and then there's now Kumawu to fight for. If NDC wins Kumawu, they become 137. NPP will use their independent to be 137 until a turnout is declared. It will then be 137. What is the rule of voting in Parliament? When it is a tie, it's presumed as though you've lost it. And so if NPP loses this election, it tells you that until they marshal all efforts towards winning a turnout, perhaps what happened to the government that got, or I think it was Liman's government, where his budget was actually thrown out. Essentially, everything, and we are going to the mid-year budget review. We're going to the 2024, which will be the election budget, and most likely going to be the budget for the implementation of the IMF project. And so this election, as Doug rightly said,
very
it's an understandable why the president himself moved there, because they have everything to lose if this seat flips from their hands.
Let me come back to you, Doc, because the two parties...
I'm not a doctor yet.
Well, sorry for that. But the two parties don't have only themselves to contend with. I mean, it's been a safe seat since 1996 for the NPP. But then we've seen an independent candidate who hitherto was a faithful of the NPP, but has shown, I mean, there's been some good showing on his part, and this has altered the dynamics for the NPP in the contest.
I mean, I somehow have a different view on that.
Oh, you do?
Yes. Because if you look at what led to that stiff contest in 2020, it was the rift between him and then Honorable Philip Baswa that led him to go independent. And he nearly pulled a surprise. Now, those reasons that led him to go independent doesn't exist any longer in terms of those tensions. You know,
are we certain on this? Because if it is so, then of course the party could have robbed him in, and then he would have been
I heard his interview. He said he was called to come and contest, and he said to them that if they allow him to go unopposed, then he will do. But knowing that if he go and contest, he will lose because he has no base in the delegates. He realized that maybe it was a plot to get him kind of out. Or if he goes and loses and goes for independent, it will be a backlash against him. So he decided not to contest on MPP's ticket and then go independent. But you see, MPP have a different candidate in the person of NS Yao Enim. He may not have inherited the enemies of Philip Baswa when he was alive. So he will be seen as a different candidate that the voters could have a second look at. Now, if you look at the polls we did in Kumawu in July last year, which had the incumbent MP on the ropes at the time. So it was clear that he was having issues in the constituency, and then again with the party. So his on-time demise has really kind of tempered the temperature of Kumawu a bit.
Yeah.
But the problem the government have is that they weren't sure whether these guys would punish them or they would vote for them. Because if you look at the dynamics of the race, it's completely different. And this is the race that you can see Alan Baumia and Anado campaign for one candidate. You never get this anywhere else. You know, so there was a kind of call for unity to maintain the majority, because neither Alan nor Baumia nor Anado can afford any missteps in Kumawu.
Right.
And it being a supposedly strong seat of the NPP, and in the morning we established that this is a seat that has recorded a number of independent candidates contesting from 1996. And we've only had, aside the person of Kwekudua Senior, which is Christian here, to try as much as possible to distinguish between the two Kwekuduas. The one who went for 2 times went in 2008 and 2012, in the person of Dominic Otin. Now, Dominic Otin had 7,000 plus votes in 2008. But in 2012, his votes reduced to about 3,000 votes. Now, speaking to some of the NPP executives and players on the grounds, with hindsight of this knowledge, the understanding is that a similar play will happen
Yes.
where Kwekudua
will lose votes.
Yes. Than what he got in 2020.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it seems to play into the data that has been captured by Global Info Analytics, because we know that in 2020, he got somewhere about almost 40% of the votes. But the projections from Global Info Analytics puts him somewhere around 16%, 17%.
Right.
That's almost half, similar to what happened to Dominic Otin. But I don't think that we can outrightly rule him out of the game. Because if you've looked at how the campaign has been, it's as though the NPP has actually ignored the NDC. That there's a certain competition from the NDC. There are videos of Chairman Wuntumi kneeling, begging delegates not to follow Kwekudua and to vote for the NPP, calling him names, saying that he's a betrayer, he's betrayed the party, and that he's not been stayed true.
We've seen videos of Chairman Wuntumi making attempts to link him to the NDC.
To the NDC as well, as being supported by the NDC. And so it is certain that the NDC and the NPP as a party, to a large extent, is threatened by what Kwekudua Senior can do if electorates and stronghold NPP members go tilt towards him. Again, when it comes to this, has to do with the sort of unity we are told NSNIM has brought to Kumawu. We listened to the president at the rally on Sunday, and the president's point is that NSNIM has been able to unite the party faithfuls. And mind you, if you look at the number of people who contested to represent the NPP, there were about, I think, 7 of them. 5 of them were cleared to contest. We know the kind of people who contested. Dr. Abuaje Da Costa of the Ghana Health Service, some former members of parliament. I think Yaoban, who was MP in 2008, was also on the ballot. And so, if he's credited of winning ahead of all these people, of bringing these people on board, and perhaps bridging that sort of gap that existed within the NPP. Mind you, in 2021, during the district level elections, there were divisions to the extent that the then member of parliament, late Philip Baswa, was presented from partaking in the district assembly elections or being within the hall. And so if it is true that he's been able to bridge that sort of division that exists within the base of the party, and how the electoral data has shown that the NPP has comfortably won Kumawu, then perhaps the independent candidate may not necessarily be a threat to the party, because Kumawu is one of the constituencies that have shown what a third force can do.
Right.
Because all these independent candidates that we are talking about, they've won with, they come either second or third.
They're able to garner enough.
They're able to beat the NDC in the constituency. Now, these are independent candidates, and most of them are checks on the ground suggest that they affiliate to the MPP.
Right.
And if with all this strong force, the MPP has always been able to win, then it may not be a difficulty maintaining the seat in Kumawu.
Musa, would you agree to that?
I think I agree with him. What the issue now is, by how much? The bragging right.
Exactly.
I think they want to be able to have a very comfortable margin, say, look, we beat all of them in comfortably, even though we're supposed to be under the hammer, you know. But if they're not able to do that with that bragging right, I think that would be a stain on the top guns who went there. So I think that's the only thing they're worried about. But I know that they will win it. But the question is, by what margin?
We'll be crossing over to Kumawu soon to bring you live pictures of the exercise there. Quite an interesting one, as we've already established, and how important it is to the two main political parties in the country, the NPP and the NDC. And of course, how the outcome will play out in Parliament. And of course, already we know that it's a game of numbers in Parliament, and we're looking at how it will play out, the outcome there of this particular election, how it will play out in Parliament, and of course, decisions or votes that will be taken in Parliament. But as the election is ongoing, we've received reports or allegations of vote buying in certain polling stations within Kumawu. One would think that with all these big guns or the wrapping up of the campaigns on both sides or on all sides by all candidates involved, we wouldn't be seeing such an act or hearing such reports on the D-Day.
I mean, it's very sad, to be very honest. If it's happening on the scale that we are seeing, it's very sad for democracy. And I think by the poll we did, it would influence the outcome of the election. Because about 23% of voters were telling us that they will be influenced by the thing that is happening there positively, which means they will vote for MPP because of what is happening there positively. And I think that is sad for democracy, to be very honest with you. We should be able to do things in time, not to wait for by-election before we do some of these things. It makes democracy look like some joke.
Abuse of incumbency?
I mean, allegations of vote buying commenced even before today, and it started with the road projects in Kumawu. We're told that the contractors were working day and night, and we've heard
the road minister denied this, saying that procurement it took time.
You see,
it's for contractor to move to site and all.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult agreeing with the road minister. We spoke with a road contractor for the Obechebi Lamte interchange. Now, this is a big project dear to the president's heart. The contractor said because the IMF agreement was not in yet, the contract had, the project has stalled. Same reports came from the Teshi, the Lake Road project, Swami interchange. Project which saw the majority leader being pelted with sachet water also halted because there were no funds as a result of ongoing negotiations with the IMF. Before IMF will agree, then there's an MP dies, by-election date is given, road minister marshals contractors to the site. And this is not the first time we are seeing this. In almost all by-elections, we see it across the political divide. How can you say I should differentiate this one from the rest, from the parting of political parties embarking on projects during by-elections? And if you know Kumawu very well, that's the district, that's I think is the Secha Kumawu district very well, you get to understand how important the road project is to them. They have about 65% tarred roads, but on tarred roads, 25%.
Right.
That's about 34.7 kilometers. And virgin roads or ungraded roads, that's about 7%. Now, the report from the district itself, even though a number of they have a lot of road projects, and we know that from the Joabin portion has been completed, but the internal routes of Kumawu itself has not been done. And we've had reports of how this particular road has led to robbery attacks on traders who usually ply that route in going to take goods from Kumasi in order to trade in Kumawu and its surrounding environs.
Right.
And so putting it in context, you get to understand how the road is of importance to the people of Kumawu. Aside this, in 2022, there were reports of sentiments within a number of youth groups within the Ashanti region about how they've not been given their fair share of the national cake, even though consistently they voted for the NPP. Now, what this means is that government appreciates what the people want. And so, if the road is the problem and we are going into a by-election, then we'll go in and try as much as possible to do the construction. And so that is where the first set of allegation is coming from. And I think that it's a bad thing that we have to delay some of these critical projects unless there's a by-election. I mean, it leads to a point that some people even engage in commentaries that they wish that their members of parliament are not around and then there's a by-election.
Right.
Because they think that is what will bring about development. But we can't grow a democracy in this manner. What is happening today is appalling. 50 cities. And sometimes, as electorates, we also, you see, you are taking 50 cities. The person comes to power. Look at the number. We are talking about over 30,000 electorates. If everybody is getting 50 cities, how much are we talking about? And if the person becomes a member of parliament, what happens? Will the person have to recoup this amount of money? What will he do to recoup this amount of money? Will he stay loyal to the people? If he does so, will he be able to recoup this amount of money? All these things, look, how much will you spend in a day? And so there's a responsibility also on the part of electors to say no. Or even perhaps, if you take it, my point is that even if you take it, make the right choice. Don't make the choice based on the money. But 23% of electorates, per the poll by Global Info Analytics, saying that we'll take whatever they are giving to us and we'll vote based on that. Nana, 23%.
It's quite a big.
It's quite a big number. And because in our case, when it comes to by-elections, the voter turnout in itself is not high. And so if you have 23% who are saying that we will take it, and they are the people who are going to turn out, they may even make up about 60% or 70% of the people who will go and vote.
Which is dangerous.
Which is very dangerous.
Very, very dangerous.
And it is a shame again because all the people who matter in Ghana's politics, as we've established already, are in Kumawu. All these people will go and sit in roundtable discussions organized by CSOs and say we condemn vote buying, we condemn this, we condemn but under your watch. And you see, you cannot tell me that. So when you meet them and you put the question to them, they'll ask you, where did you hear this? You say, I heard it from this police station. I've not been there yet. When I get there, I'll find out. But they are lying.
Talk of evidence. We have a video that shows the alleged vote buying incident in Kumawu. Now, there are over 34,000 eligible voters in Kumawu, voting at 75 polling stations. but some way, somehow, vote buying is ongoing. Let's bring you that video of the alleged vote buying incident in Kumawu, and then we can continue the discussion.
Because he's in charge, but I'm not supervising by a year. But so he can't send the blame to you. No, he said he forced them to sign. But why? The question is, can you tell us second
Well, this is actually the video of when the said declaration form that had already been signed was discovered. This is not that of the votes buying. I established before that insert came up. 34,000 eligible voters, 75 polling stations. We have enough money to...
It only cost them 1.7 million. It's not much.
1.7 million Ghana cedis. And that's only...
Yeah. I mean, looking at what the price at stake.
Yeah.
I mean, even some of the delegates... So I've spoken to some of the people on the ground, and this is what happens. So you go and vote, you show proof that you've gone to vote, and then you come and take your money. And what we are also getting from our reporter on the ground, Hafiz Tijani, is that
I understand Hafiz is joining us. Voting has ended in Kumawu. So let's go live to the Ashanti region, the Kumawu constituency, and speak to Ashanti regional correspondent Hafiz Tijani. Hafiz, good work so far. Congratulations. You've been on the grounds. You've been on the field since morning, gathering news, of course, with respect to the by-election. Voting has ended now, no?
Exactly, voting has ended and counting is ongoing. Counting has even ended in some of the polling centers, like the Anglican JHS. We have just moved from that place to the Anglican Primary Polling Center. And let me run you through the results from the Anglican JHS polling station, which is in the Kumawu Township. The MPP candidates Ernest Yao Enim polled 170 votes, 170 votes. The NDC candidate Kwesi Amankwa garnered 21 votes, 21 votes. The independent candidate Kokudua, the first independent candidate Kokudua, polled 101 votes, 101 votes. The second independent candidate, Kokudua, the second, polled 2 votes, 02 votes. We are counting is, and there was no any rejected there. The total votes cast was 294, 294. We have moved here to the Anglican Primary School polling center, and counting is ongoing currently. But counting is done for the MPP candidate, Ernest Yao Enim. He polled 202 votes, 202 votes. And the NDC candidate polled 16 votes, 16 votes. The first independent candidate, his ballot is being counted now. And I can tell you there has been anxiety among constituents, residents, party supporters in Kumawu, and the big wigs who have come here. I can see some presidential staffers like Jefferson Saki from the Jubilee House. I can see Akogan of the NDC, who are all here monitoring the process. There are a host of regional and national executives who are also spread across the polling stations or polling centers where counting is ongoing. So voting has officially ended in all the 75 polling stations, and counting is ongoing. Counting, as we said, has ended in some of the polling stations, and the Electoral Commission also is preparing the Collation Center to get all the results sent to the Collation Center here at Kumawu for the collation to be done. So that is the update from the Kumawu constituency. So so we're just running you through results of the Anglican primary school, and we mentioned that the MPP candidate Yao NS Yao Enim polled 202 votes, and then the NDC candidate Kwesi Amankwa polled 16 votes, 16 votes, and the first independent candidate Kwekudua polled 117 votes, 117 votes. So the second candidate, Kokudia, so his has been counted. So he also polled 5 votes, 05 votes. Right. So that is the results from the Anglican primary school. And you can hear the chants in the background. People are excited about the results here. So Nana, collation from one polling center to the other will be giving viewers up to speed of the results before we converge at the collation center to give viewers a feel of the exercise or what has been done. The electoral officers here are also gathering their materials, waiting to transport them to the collation center where the final collation will be done, and the Ashanti Regional Director of the Electoral Commission is leading this charge to be able to collate the results and declare as same.
Right. We trust that you'll be giving us the details as and when they do come in, and of course the final declaration when it is ready. But 34,000 eligible voters. Kindly paint us a picture of the turnout today.
Well, so in the morning at some of the polling centers, the turnout was encouraging until in the afternoon or midday, where the turnout dropped. But the turnout in this election varies from one point to the other. You go to some places, you have huge turnouts, especially in the morning. You go to other places, you have a very low turnout. But getting into the afternoon or to close of poll, you had a lot of people turning out to vote. But we didn't have some long queues within the polling centers where when the polling or the polls were being closed. We didn't have some huge numbers. We just had skeletal staff of the Electoral Commission who were waiting for the people who will be late voters to come and vote, but they had to wait until no one came and the time was up, then they closed the poll.
Right, and then of course with representations from the various parties and their roles in this particular election, you've mentioned that some of the bigwigs are still there, but aside from playing electoral roles, did you observe any other roles played by these bigwigs?
Well, so you find them going around the polling stations, engaging with their agents. The first port of call for any bigwig who would visit the polling center was their party agents, so that they can at least hear from them some reports or feedback of what is happening at a particular polling center. So that is what they have been doing, going around the areas monitoring and also trying to speak to the Electoral Commission to get them to give them any concern or allay any concerns from their party agents who are stationed at the polling center, so the Electoral Commission or the police can resolve same. So that is what you find them doing.
Right, I'm going to ask you for your general observation of the exercise so far, but before that, some pockets of incidents that were recorded. The very first one, or one of the initial ones, having to do with that signed declaration form. How was that issue resolved? Because in the morning when we spoke, the understanding was that the NDC wanted the presiding officer at that particular polling station replaced. So how was that particular issue resolved?
So when the Ashanti Regional Director of the Electoral Commission intervened, the pink sheets were changed. So the NDC monitoring team didn't have much problem with the officer there. they have said that since the Electoral Commission has stepped in to resolve the incident, they were okay, but they were still going to continue to monitor the process at that place until the close of polls. So when we left that polling center, that was the Oyoko Methodist polling center, that officer was still at post and was performing his duties.
All right, Hafiz, now give us your general observation of the exercise so far, and then we can leave you to visit other polling centers and, of course, gradually make your way to the Collation Center.
Well, because this was much anticipated by both political parties and with the emergence of two independent candidates, a lot of people were anxious to see how the votes or voting or the process will pan out. And, you know, as typical of any by-election, previous history in the political history of the country or previous experiences in Ghana where you have some pockets of violence. So that anxiety was part of some of these thinking. But because of the deployment of the police and the comportment of the political parties, the voters themselves, the process itself was very peaceful, largely peaceful across all the polling centers. People vote, people were free to go to the centers to vote, except that there was some kind of alleged inducement, some of which we have confirmed by some of the voters who spoke to us and said that they were given monies by some agents of political parties who, of course, were directing them to vote for their candidates.
All right, Hafiz, we'll leave you for now so you can visit other polling centers and bring us the results from there. And, of course, hope as well expect you to get to the Collation Center and bring us the final results and the declaration of same. Now, Musa, let me come back to you on this.
I was wondering, did he give us the numbers for the second polling session for Kokudia Senior?
Yes,
117. 117. So there's Anglican JHS and then there's Anglican Primary.
I mean, from these results, he's outperforming his poll numbers.
Yes.
The first result puts him at 34%.
Right.
And 58% for MPP's candidate. The second result gives him 40%, and the MPP guy is 69%. So Kokudia is outperforming strongly his polling numbers.
This comparison is against what?
The polling, the poll, yes. So we just look at how the poll went and what these numbers are coming from the polling station. Eventually, he would iron out, but I think it's a very good showing. I don't know where exactly these numbers are coming from, but we have a number of areas that he needs to do well. If he does in those areas, then MPP will be in trouble. Not necessarily lose, but the bragging right will not be there.
He will be closing the gap.
Closing the gap.
Hassan, early days yet?
Well, it's just two polling stations, about 75 polling stations. And
so 2 out of 75.
So there are still 73 more to go. But of course, as I've always indicated, that any election from now to 2024, regardless of the advantage that the NPP may have in any polling station, they will of course be at the receiving end of anybody who can strategize and campaign appropriately.
Yeah.
Because the economy is not in good shape. People are not getting what they have to get. I mean, you speak to some constituency executives, branch executives, polling station executives. Now, these are people who are not on any stipend from the party. These are people who are working so heartedly for the party. And these are people whose businesses are not going well. And so even though they like the NPP, in their own pocket, they can also feel the challenge that the normal Ghanaian is feeling. And recently I engaged one lecturer area coordinator in one of the constituencies in the Greater Accra. I'm saying this is a constituency that ordinary or on any day, the NPP will win. However, the economic challenge is in a way that we need the party ought to work in addressing the economic challenges. Because you go to the young people, and what they are telling you is that we need job. And in his words, he says, I don't necessarily need a job from the party or from the government. However, I do my own work. He fixed towels for people. But he says, for 4 months, things are not going on well, that he's not gotten any job yet. And so even though he's an electoral area coordinator, the current economic challenges are affecting him just as it is affecting anybody in the country. And so, first thing, the NPP will be at the receiving end of any campaign from now to 2024. And so, from the performance of Kokudia in 2020, with these economic challenges, if he's seen as an alternative, you will get to understand why some people genuinely want to go onto his side. And I've already talked about the sentiments within Ashanti region in general, about how they think that they've been taken for granted by the NPP.
Perhaps not necessarily taken for granted, but they feel let down.
These are their words.
They feel let down.
I don't speak for them. They say they've been taken for granted. I cannot whittle it down.
Choice of words, well, but maybe let down or they feel neglected.
No, I'm saying I cannot whittle down what they are saying. That is what, if they've been let down, they won't throw sachet water on the majority leader.
Well, maybe they feel neglected, and for which reason they want to take such actions.
Semantics, anyway. But the point ultimately is that there are those sentiments in the Ashanti region. And so even in 2024, it is not going to be an easy one for the NPP in the Ashanti region. And so it's interesting. Early days yet, but it's interesting the votes that we are seeing from the independent candidate. It's interesting also what we are getting from the NDC's candidates.
I was going to come to that.
He's yet to break into at least even half of what the NPP's candidate is getting, or even match up to the...
And if this should be a trend, or this should continue past about 30 polling stations, then of course the die is cast. It's a done deal.
So it's very normal with polling in Kumawu. Anytime an independent candidate performs very well, the NDC does not feature at all in that election. And so it is quite understandable. They started in 1996, NDC as a party started in 1996 with 37.6%. And then
was there an independent in that particular contest?
In 1996,
because then we can tell the effects or the impact the independent had in that particular election.
You know, if you look at the polling numbers we had, there were almost 12% of NDC supporters who were voting for Kokudia Senior.
Oh.
Yes. So sometimes they feel like, okay, we cannot win. So let's support the person that can give trouble to the leading candidate. And I think that's what you might be seeing right now.
But then also per the data you have and the polling that you did, clearly from what I gather from all this, the contest really is between the MPP and the
yes, absolutely. So and currently, in fact, the MPP candidate is doing exactly what we said he would do in the poll. The first one he had 58%, second one 59%, and Kudia is on 34%. So it's really
it's a close call. Very close call.
So I was talking about the trend in Kumawu.
Exactly.
In 1996, there was no independent candidate. In the year 2000, there was an independent candidate in Kumawu, in the person of Kingsford Boatin. Now, he didn't perform very well, so he got 13% of the votes. Then the NDC candidate, Opening Kwame Edu, he got 25%. Then you come to 2004 in Kumawu, where there was no candidate, and so in that particular election, the NDC maintains 20.7% in Kumawu. And then in 2008, you get Dominic Otin, who comes second.
Right.
With 7,000.
Dominic here being an independent candidate.
Yes, Dominic here being an independent candidate in 2008.
Yes.
And then the NDC drops all the way from 20.7% in 2004 to 15.9% in 2008. And then in 2012, Dominic doesn't perform very well, but the NPP shoots up. And then the NDC remains at 15.2% in 2012. Then you talk about 2016, and in 2016 as well, you get that there's no independent candidate. But Philip Baswa, I think this is the 2016 is the first showing of Philip Baswa.
Yeah.
Philip Baswa gets 78.17%. That's 21,794 of the votes. The NDC's candidate get 21.16%. Then you come to 2020, and in 2020,
well, we had the first showing of Kwekudia.
Where you have the first showing of Kwekudia. And then Kwekudia gets about 40% of the total of the votes. And then Bernard Opoku-Mafo of the NDC gets 8.33%. And so the point I'm making is that if you look at it, the NDC's performance in Kumawu is dependent on how an independent candidate performs. And so it is not out of the ordinary seeing that the independent candidate here being Kwekudia Senior is performing creditably well. I mean, the first polling station that we get, 170 to 101, that's a difference of 69. The second one, 202 and 117, that's a difference of about 75. And so he's performing creditably well. I mean, at least more than half. He's getting half or more than half of what
he's
averaging what the NPP candidate is getting. And if you put it to the pattern vis-a-vis the NDC candidate, you understand why the NDC candidate will make in 21 and 16. Kwaku Jr., his presence there has been questioned from day one. There's been issues about how the NPP, fingers were pointed to the NPP, that it was an attempt to diffuse.
Sorry, before you continue,
Musa,
as at the time of this polling, was Kwekudia Jr. represented?
Yes, in fact, the poll was done on Saturday.
Okay.
Last Saturday, so it was quite fresh.
Right. Okay.
He was there.
When everyone was wrapping up their campaign.
Yes. Right. And he didn't feature at all.
All right. So Hansen,
it's in line.
It's interesting. But so if allegations or claims that he was brought to diffuse
Kwekudia
Senior, then of course the person who has done so has done a very bad job. But you do more professional works into some of these things. I can't imagine how such a strategy will work in any way.
You know, sometimes they want to play on the ignorance of the voters.
Exactly.
When it comes to voting. An old lady or mature person, he or she gets the two symbols looking similar. They are very kente, all of them. They all Kwekudia.
So that could confuse.
They will be confused.
It has a tendency to confuse some voters.
Yes.
It really has. And that is why the laws are clear.
And I think the Electoral Commission did a very good work in.
I was wondering how they settled on the hole.
I was asking the same question.
Maybe they were digging a hole for the master.
Perhaps he has a family history of farmers.
As to of all symbols, they settled on a hole. But I think that at least it brought some bit of transparency.
Exactly.
We cannot have a system that allow people to play with our democracy at their own whims and caprices. Because you think somebody, so tomorrow because we think an MPP candidate thinks the NDC is a threat, goes to bring an independent candidate with an inverted umbrella. We
turn upside
down. We need to be very serious with our democracy, and it's giving a show because it's even difficult getting to this Kwekudia Jr. But he has a right in law to contest.
In fact, when we analyzed his few supporters that we recorded were coming from MPP and floating voters.
Right.
Yes, very few, but the numbers were not.
It's very understandable.
Right. Okay, so Musa, I mean, per the polling you did and the results you saw there, vis-a-vis the actual results we are going to be seeing today, this is a parliamentary by-election. But what sort of reflection would it have on the presidential race in 2024? Look,
if the race ends with Kokudia in 59%, around 59 to 60%, I will regard this as a failure. You know, he should be, with the threat of Baswa not there and having a free ride in terms of unity in the party, it should have been doing around 70 plus. And if it's not 70 plus, it means people are still angry, regardless of the seemingly peaceful nature of Kumawu. And they may be translating the economic hardship into protest vote. And I think we might see this everywhere in 2024, unless something else changes.
I'm asking this because in 2020, the presidential race in Kumawu, President Akufo-Addo won with 23,502 votes, representing 80.69%. And John Mahama, 5,325 votes, representing 18.28%. And so I'm trying to do the comparisons here. The outcome of this one,
it is
and
the
how
little here and there.
Right.
You don't expect NDC to win Ashanti region. But if they are able to
play
around 27, 28, 29%, MPP will be finished.
In 2020, we know what happened in Ashanti region. The claims about imposition of candidates. And so a party that had around that time, I think about 169 members of parliament, comes down to 137 and had to depend on that one candidate they chastised during the election period before they could form a majority in parliament. And so the dynamics in 2020, depending on how the NPP will manage the parliamentary primaries, I think may differ. Again, if you go to Kumawu, the presidential candidate of the NPP since 96 has seen an increase in their votes, but for 2012. Of course, we can go into 2012 and we all know what happened in 2012. And perhaps some reasons can be given for that. But in 1996, for instance, the NPP's candidate then had 61.1%. In 2000, 72.3%. In 2004, 74.9%. In 2008, increases to 82.8%. In 2012, reduces to 78.6%. Even though it reduces, it's an increment of what had happened from 1996 to 2004. In 2016, it increases to 81.9%. And then in 2020, Nanado gets 80.69%. And so if you look at it, it's as though when it comes to the presidential, regardless of what is happening at the parliamentary level, for the presidential, the people understand what they are about and who they are in for. If you look at the NDC, there's been a reduction from 96. So while the NPP is seeing an increment in their numbers, the NDC is seeing a reduction. And so if you look at 96, they have 38.1%. In 2000, 25.2%. In 2004, 23.4%. In 2008, 16.1%. And in 2012, 20.7%. This perhaps explains the reduction of the NPP in 2012. And then in 2016, it reduces to 17.6%, and then increases marginally in 2020 to 18.28%. Looking at this, I think that it will be very difficult to draw some correlation between the parliamentary results and the presidential. And when I spoke to some of the NPP executives earlier today, they were clearing their mind, just saying, our problem is parliamentary.
Right.
Parliamentary has its own issues. Somebody is disgruntled, somebody contested. He thinks the process was not fair to him. He takes some members of the party and picks them along into the parliamentary election. But when it comes to the presidential, and there's the consensus that this is our candidate, the NPP believes that they do not have anything to deal with when it comes to presidential.
Right. Now, let's look at, the results of this particular by-election and what it will say of the current leadership of the NDC. This is a parliamentary by-election in a constituency that's generally can be said to be an MPP seat. But this is the first by-election. I mean, this leadership came into office quite recently. They have done their internal elections, their primaries, both parliamentary and presidential. But this is the first one outside the box of the NDC. How important is winning this seat to the leadership of the NDC going into the 2024 elections?
I mean,
Kumawu.
I don't believe any of them believe NDC is going to win the seat in Kumawu today. I will be shocked to the bone that that belief is there. But probably they want to see how they perform and also to test their operational modus operandi in terms of monitoring the elections and see what MPP may come up with, so they can really have a lessons learned from Kumawu. I think that's why they went there with full force. With regards to winning, I sincerely believe they don't know. They don't believe they will win, but they want to see how they perform generally on the ground and to listen to the people probably while they are there. But winning, absolutely not. And to pick some lessons from there and strategize going forward into the 2024 elections. Absolutely.
On results of the NDC in this by-election, I particularly, and I think the NDC should be looking at it from two legs. The first is if and only if they can win. Which
are you stressing on if?
Oh yes, of course. If and only if. Usually, I want to give that possibility. That possibility. But sometimes it's very difficult to give that possibility. So
margin of error.
I mean, if and only if they win. But I think the most important thing has to do with by what margin they will lose. By what margin they will lose. At the national level, the NDC has been running a campaign, even though campaigning has not started in its full force, that Ghanaians have seen what is happening to the economy, have seen what is happening to their pockets. And so they will say no to the NPP when it comes to 2024. Already I'm seeing on social media that some NDC activists are saying that they are seeing some progress in their votes. As to how true or not it is, after all 75 results come in, we'll be able to tell if there's some progress. But the margin, if you're able to increase their margin substantially and do well to a certain extent, then at the end of the day, what will happen is that it will show that, one, what the NDC is saying is really true. That in Kumawu, that they've been struggling in, they've been able to show that indeed the Ghanaian people are listening to what they are saying. And the Ghanaian people reject what the NDC, the NPP has been saying, that it's economic factors and we're doing well with the economy until COVID came. Even after COVID, we're doing well until Russia, Ukraine came. And so on that first leg, I'll be looking at the margin with which they lose. If they perform creditably well compared to 2020 and compared to other elections in Kumawu, that will give an indication of what their campaign message is saying. And also, it's very important looking at the unanimity of support this candidate has enjoyed. Mind you, he went unopposed. He was not contested.
Yeah.
And so the NDC doesn't have any issues to deal with now, forging unity. They are a united force already, because there was no primaries already in the constituency. He was unopposed. And so from that, you say that the NDC has some strength compared to that of the NPP. The NPP that had 5 candidates contesting in the constituency that had a supposed NPP member breaking away and contesting independent. And so if you have this advantage of unity of your ranks with you, and you're showing in the election, it's not, commendable in a certain way, then it may tell of what can even happen in some of those constituencies, like in constituencies like Asomasi, where you had that sort of stiff competition, neck to neck, between Muntaka and Masawudu. And so I think that they have the unity here. And so the elections will also tell what may even happen in some of these elections. And the level of work the executives will have to do to bring their ranks and file together. As to what it will tell on the current crop of executives, I think that this will not be enough data to pass any form of verdict on the work of the executives. The national chairman in the person of
Johnson
Asiedu Nketia, we've seen his work as a general secretary.
Yes, but I am interested because this is his first election as national chair.
But he's also coming into a place that we have shown that to a large extent it is a cool zone for the NPP.
I know you mentioned that the NDC candidate didn't have a contest. It was more like unopposed. But if you look at the NDC members who are going to vote today, 8% of them are saying that they would vote for the MPP's candidate. 8%. And you have 12% saying that they are going to vote for Kukudia Senior. So already, they don't feel they can win it. And for that matter, they are giving their support to others to win. If you look at those who are from MPP that are crossing carpet to vote for NDC candidate, just 4%.
Okay.
When you compare that of NDC crossing carpet to vote for Kukudia, it's 12%. Right. So I wouldn't judge NDC by the number of votes they get. I'm looking at the MPP as how they perform. Because they are it's their margin that matters, not that of the NDC. Yes.
Very interesting revelation there. But again, what it also states is, because in politics and in election, there's a principle of competitive candidate. And so usually there are certain electorates who want to align with a competitive candidate. And so reason they will say that we are not winning. And that's why when you bring a third party force at the national level, everybody will say, Mekose Maba, Intimento Mao. So everybody is looking at that competitive candidate. And if within the NDC, 20% of electorates are saying that their candidate is not competitive enough for them to say that they are going to vote for him to win, that is a serious challenge, considering the fact that he didn't get any form of contest in the election. This brings into scrutiny what happened there. Was somebody in the race that was asked not to contest? Or is it that within the entire NDC in Kumawu, nobody at all really wants to or think that NDC Kumawu can win the seat, and so they'll put their foot forward to be there? And so this will be very interesting to find out with looking at the data in more detail.
But clearly a must-win for the NPP.
For the NPP, you see, the NPP would need, you remember, comfortable lead. Do you know what things like comfortable lead do? What things like comfortable lead do is to keep your 4 million voters together. Give them hope that we can do it, and try to convince your floating voters. If MPP loses this election, you know what it will tell the branch executive, the electoral area coordinator, who is not getting anything from the party. So you won't get that sort of commitment to work. And so for the NPP, they don't have any other option than to win the election.
Clearly, it's a must-win for them because, you see, aside from enjoying a favorable voting pattern over the years, winning Kumawu is more or less a vote of confidence in this administration, and of course, we'll have a reflection on the elections in 2024.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think it's not vote of confidence.
I think
yes. Kumawu is MPP. And they fully understand the consequences of the seat going to somebody else.
Right.
In parliamentary terms. That is why maybe they were begging there, because if that has happened, if that happens, believe me.
No, but I'm speaking not necessarily of the parliamentary.
No, but
of the presidential.
No, I mean presidential. I don't think this. You can't read anything presidential from Kumawu here.
It's settled.
That one is not.
It's settled.
The issue about Kumawu now is that, look, if it had been anywhere else, it would have been bloody. Because the margins you have elsewhere would not enable you to hold on to the seat with this kind of backlash.
Right.
But Kumawu, they had a very huge, comfortable margin. I mean, traditionally, with the exception of Kokudia coming in and threatening it. So you really can't use Kumawu as a vote of confidence.
Right. Well, hold on for me. Let me go over the phone lines and speak to Deputy National Communications Officer of the NDC, Malik Basintali. He's joining us from Kumawu to give us his observation, his perspectives of the election so far. Good evening, and many thanks to you for joining us.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Grateful. So the exercise, we understand, the voting itself has ended. Counting is underway, concluded in some polling stations. Are you able to tell us exactly where you are, which polling center, and of course, help us understand the situation there?
Yes, I am currently moving from the Salvation Army Primary School in Dadieso to Kumawu Township. I have with me some pink sheets of the various polling stations around that particular corridor. And so I'm currently moving to where our own collation is being made at the district capital.
Right. Now, Malik, can you help us or tell us what your observation has been so far with respect to the by-election in Kumawu?
Well, there's been a relatively low turnout. I mean, just a few polling stations actually crossed half of their total registered, voter population. You had a lot of people, actually not reaching that mark. Some were far below half. Proceedings started quite early. You had the flow of money in the system. The monetization was excessive by the ruling MPP government. You had a lot of people sharing money even in the lines. In fact, there was a particular polling station, Secure Methodist DA, where the agents actually drew the attention of the Electoral Commission and the security agencies of a particular polling agent of the MPP, doling out 20 cedis to whoever was about to cast his or her vote. And so it was visible. It wasn't hidden. They were doing it in broad daylight. They were sharing money. Some were giving 50 cedis, some were giving 100 cedis. And we tried drawing the attention of all stakeholders involved. Apart from that, what we've observed is a swift, increase in the votes of the NDC. In a polling station like Methodist Primary, in 2020, the NDC had only 39 votes. The MPP had 359. But in this particular election, what we realized was that the MPP dropped to 309. And then we increased our votes to 67, which meant that, there was a sharp increase in our votes and a decline in that of the MPP. It reflected across several other polling stations. And so it's been encouraging. We are realizing that our work had not been in vain. We realized that the people appreciate the current economic situation. The people appreciate the performance of the NDC and that of the current MPP. The people appreciate our message to them. The people appreciate our goodwill and our honesty in whatever we were doing, because not even a penny was spent from the quotas of the NDC. In fact, we are in opposition, and first of all, we don't even have the resources, that much resources to give out. Secondly, we are against the monetization of elections in this country. And so we went out there with our message, we went out there with our goodwill. And so far, we are confident that, things are turning around. A polling station like the Islamic primary, in the 2020 election, the MPP beat us by some 10 votes. But in this particular election, we beat them by more than 70 votes. And so that's been impressive. We can go polling station by polling station. I can give you the results we had in 2020 and what we've gotten now. And you would appreciate that the NDC has had some very significant, some very visible, improvements in whatever we've been doing in the last few days. And so, voting counting hasn't ended in all polling stations. We are not entirely done with our coalition. Currently, we are done with more than 46 out of the 75, polling stations there. And so, in the next 1 hour, I am certain that we should be done with all our results.
Well, Malik, you've just given us some data there, of course, some figures there, and it underscored how it gives credence to the work that you have done going into this election. But the figures you've mentioned, quite marginal. How significant is this to you, and of course, its impact on the final results?
It's been very impressive, like I said. This is an encouraging one. It tells, and the figures show. I have quoted some figures to you. And and the last time I checked, the NDC was hitting 2,000 out of about 35 at the time, polling stations that had come in. But if you remember, in the 2020 election, we had a little above 2,000 votes. But if out of 35, we are hitting 2,000, 35 out of 75, we are already hitting 2,000. It should tell you, what the optics are, and it should tell you what the projections will look like. And so, we are confident. We believe that whatever we've been doing in the last few days, are really speaking for us. We are encouraged by what the people have shown us so far. And we are determined. Amidst all the vote buying, you saw it. Some of you saw it. You saw what they came there to do. You saw what they came in their numbers with logistics, sharing clothes, sharing money, all sorts of goodies. You saw it for yourself. Aside that, there were attempts by the EC, and I believe that after this election, they will have so many questions to answer. In fact, in less than 24 hours, we exposed some rigging ploys, and I say this forcefully. By the Electoral Commission. The first was the deliberate omission of the BVD column on the pink sheets. Which of course is part of the law, so long as the CI 127 is concerned. And so we drew the attention that it was a challenge. It was one that caused a lot of confusion during the 2020 election. And if you remember, at the Supreme Court hearings, it was challenging because you could not determine the total number of people who had casted their votes at a particular police station, all because those verifications were not done and were not inputted in the pink sheets. And so we drew the attention and they got that rectified. The second was an electoral commission officer who compelled agents to sign on a pink sheet even before voting commenced. And so we were surprised. And we were wondering what they intended doing at that particular polling station, because you cannot sign a declaration form when voting hasn't even commenced. So what are you signing to? What are you signing to? And then surprisingly, the booklets that were given to them, the total number of votes there was 551. Total number of registered voters. Ideally, the EC will give them a few surplus in case of worn out, ballot papers or damaged ballot papers. So they usually add about 4 or 5. So the EC was supposed to give them 555. But when we went through the ballot papers issued to them, they had issued over 575. And so we're wondering what they were attempting to do there. And the EC official was part and parcel of this. And so, some of these things had come in. We were vigilant enough. We exposed them, and we got all these people taken off the scene. But in the coming days, we will unravel a lot. We cannot go into the 2024 election with this mindset of the Electoral Commission. And so I believe that we will have to set up, we will look at some of these things, and we will face them head on. Kumawu was a trial. We have chalked more than 90% taxes in whatever vigilance we put in there. We've chalked more than 95% taxes in the works we've done there. And at the end of the day, you from the media, perspective, will see the improvement in whatever we've been doing in the last few days.
Right. Malik, one final question before you go. Going into Kumawu, we've seen that you've marshaled men from the national, of course, the regional of the NDC into Kumawu, and you've done some work based on which the candidate running, of course, on the ticket of the NDC, Kwesi Amankwa, has spoken with so much confidence about winning the seat. What was the plan going into Kumawu to increase the votes of the NDC or to win the seat?
First of all, Kumawu is a stronghold of the MPP. That has never been in contention because, the data shows.
Right.
The second point was that we were going into an election that was already occupied by the NPP. And not just occupied, but occupied with very huge margins. In 2020, we had about 2,000 plus votes. The NPP chalked over 14,000 votes, with an independent candidate coming close with about 11,000 votes. And so, first, going into the election, we should go with a posture of selling our message. We should go with a posture of attempting to convince the people. We should go with a posture of having the people compare from what we have done for them in our last administration to what the MPP has been doing for them. And so we went into the election knowing very well that we were going to meet very traditional minds. And when I say traditional minds, I mean very political minds who are tilted towards the MPP so far as the 2020 data shows and all previous data. And so we knew what we were going to meet. We knew that we were going to meet in fact, we even thought we were going to meet very hostile minds who were not going to listen to us. But I just demonstrated to you that the data has shown, and the data has shown clearly the sort of election we're going into, and at least data has proven that we have done our best. And so, whatever the outcome is, I believe strongly that we'll accept it in good faith, and we'll go on with it.
All right, thank you very much, Malik Basintali, the Deputy National Communications Officer of the National Democratic Congress, NDC. Now, for a party as big as the NDC, clearly you would know or agree that they already had their own set of data. They've done their own polling, as Global Info Analytics has been doing. And so they more or less knew where they stood. But of course, they had to go in there, test the waters, and then strategize, map out going forward into the national elections, the general elections in 2024.
The comment by Basintali goes directly into my point of how this election should be assessed in the eyes of the NDC. That if they do not win, by what margin do they lose, or by what margin do they increase their results? And certainly, as is indicated to us, even though they are seeing that they are losing the election, they seem to be happy about the sort of margin that they've gotten. From what he's reported, he's indicated to us, having increased their votes in one polling station from 39 to 67 to them is a good one. But to further appreciate or better appreciate how best they've performed in this election, we'll have to wait for all the results to come in to better appreciate it.
I've seen a couple of...
I noticed you reacted to some of the figures.
Yes, in fact, I've just seen a figure that has been bundled around out of about 65 polling stations that they've recorded. And the MPP is around 13,445, NDC 2,955. The independent candidate, Kukudia, 2,198. And the Kukudia's junior is 58, and that gives MPP around 72%.
Yes, and so from what I've also been seeing similar results
going on.
From what is happening, it looks as though the NDC's candidate
done well.
is doing better than even Kwekudia. And we rarely indicated here that Kwekudia may not be able to perform to 2020
exactly.
His 2020
the
performance.
In
Musa rightly outlined how factors that played in 2020 are different from factors now. I also stretched on what the data has shown with the only independent candidate aside Kwekudia who has gone for 2 times and how his numbers reduced to half the second time. And so it looks like for Kumawu, they don't depart from their voting pattern at all. And it'll be interesting to know how exactly it will end. But we're talking about lessons and what the NDC may learn. From my observations from Accra and our interactions from our correspondent on the ground, get a sense of visibility and tenacity on the part of the NDC. Look at the issues that came up about this particular presiding officer signing the declaration form. I think that is at least
the lessons that
a lesson that they are taking forward, to be very vigilant. Because
as Malik also mentioned, the number of per polling station, the numbers will have to marry.
Yes.
You cannot bring more ballot papers than the eligible voters in the particular polling station.
And so it's I think that is one thing that they are looking at. I mean, we've seen, and so it depends on how they may replicate it during the 2024 general election. I don't think in the 2024 general election you have the luxury of the likes of Okudzeto Ablakwa being in Kumawu or being in any other election.
Of course, he will be a candidate himself. That will be canvassing North Town.
And so, looking, it will be interesting to see how they replicate this structure. And so one issue that I witnessed is that if you look at what happened at the Oyoko Police Center, the NDC's candidate is claiming that he was forced to sign the declaration form. And we have a video of that incident. If you could put that particular video, and you listen to the commentary, the NPP's representative at Oyoko was making the point that you know the rules. Nobody cannot force you. And so if you signed on your own. I've also seen a video of General Mosquito, Johnson Asidin Ketia, the chairman of the NDC, where he says the NDC's polling agent has been placed at a disadvantaged position where he's not able to monitor the process appropriately. For me, this brings into the question the level of training and education, perhaps, some of these polling agents will have.
Yeah.
You will not always have lawyers, you will not always have accountants to be your polling agents. And you would, of course, have to rely on the youth in these communities, you have to rely on party activists. And so I think that going forward, one of the things the NDC should be looking at is how to make sure that their polling agents and their executives are trained and retooled in such a manner that they should know their rights when they are at the polling station, that if the polls are not over, the results have not been sorted, counted, and declared, nobody has a right to tell you to sign the declaration form.
Yeah.
Do you know, signing the declaration form, what that could mean? You've signed to something with no figures on it. And they could have cooked
And that's a blank
any
check.
form. That's a blank check. They could have cooked any form of figures.
Right.
If this had not been identified, and this is not to say anybody wanted
Or
to, intended to do anything. But if at the first level of check, your polling agent is not able to insist that this is not something that I'm supposed to do, and does not have the number of anybody, even if he thinks he's being bullied, he can readily call to his aid, and he just signs it. In an election where you have almost everybody who matter in the NDC there, all your big lawyers are there in that particular election, then what about in 2024? And so I think that this should be a great lesson for the NDC going to 2024 general election.
Right. Let's bring a recap of how the elections have panned out so far since voting commenced early on this morning, and some of the issues that were raised. Early on during CNR Extra right here on Citi TV, my colleague Philip Nilate spoke to the Ashanti Regional NDC chairman, Andrews, who was of the opinion, of the view that presiding officer should be replaced. Let's take a look at that insert. When we come back, we'll also hear from the opposing side, that's the MPP, and what's their own reaction is to that particular issue.
Campaign activities have officially concluded in Kumawu, but the atmosphere remains charged. The election remains a significant topic for discussion among constituents in the constituency. The Electoral Commission has assured its readiness for the election and has called on political parties to contribute to ensuring a credible process.
All that we are requiring from the candidates is for them to provide effective polling agents, not the noisy one, the one who knows the difference between 69 and 96, the one who can understand adding up figures.
And that happened at Oyoko, one of the polling stations at Oyoko, was that the declaration forms were pre-signed before the end of the elections. We all know that that pink sheet must be signed after the elections are over and counting is complete. But the EC boss forced the agents there to sign it. So we rushed there and we saw that it was true. And the EC official there has confirmed that he did that. So we've requested for a new pink sheet or a new declaration form, and the EC officer must be changed. But as we are talking now, they've got a new pink sheet, but the EC boss is still on post.
So this tells you that you are satisfied with what the EC has done concerning the pink sheet and resolving that particular issue?
We are not yet satisfied because the EC boss or the EC officer in which signed the documents before is still on post. So we don't know what he can do again, but we want him removed.
You want him removed so that you can... What will this mean to you if the EC officer is not removed as you are requesting or demanding for before the elections ends today?
Because he can do anything. Because now we are very vigilant. This election, we are taking it serious. So what they are doing, we are not happy about it. That's why we want him removed so that we can get a new person. Because an easy boss who has done this, we don't trust him again. He can do anything.
That was the Ashanti Regional NDC chairman speaking to Philip Neal Lati earlier on CNR Extra. Mustafa Salam, who was also moved from the MPP headquarters here in Accra to Kumawu, of course, as part of the men who have been marshaled into the constituency, has a response to this particular issue. Let's take a listen to that. He also spoke to Philip.
It's a declaration of polls form that brought a little bit of an issue. In fact, currently I am at that police station, Oyoko. Now, what happened was that the explanation of the presiding officer, that when he was filling the form, he mistakenly signed. But when he realized the mistake, he called for a new form to be brought, the declaration form to be brought, so that he would transfer the information that was on the first sheet to the second one, which would not be signed, and wait until after polls for all the polling agents to sign. So I was surprised that the NDC wanted to make a fuss about it. You see, it is not an issue that ballot accounting has indicated that something untoward has happened. If you do ballot accounting and you realize that something untoward has happened, then the integrity of the election is questioned. But in this place, there's no problem with the entire process. It's a form that is going to play a role at much later time of the day. So it was much ado about nothing, but that matter has been resolved.
Right, so clearly both parties agree that there was that incident of a declaration form having been signed even before polls or voting ends. We have a video of the incident when this particular declaration form was discovered.
He's in charge, but I'm not supervising my area, so you can't send the blame to you. No, he said he forced them to sign. But the other question is can you can second one time to sign? By who your agents have protested. I protested. Anywhere that knows they are supposed to sign. But you can start to sign. I protested. After election, you can even decide to sign. So why should you the right one has begun now? I was Police, this thing it should be out. Let's take this one. Let's bring the new one. The new one. Let's do that. It must be decided after that. Okay. Why you voting? But why you voting? I need him up here. Can you hold it?
Well, as you saw, that was the incident with respect to the already signed pink sheet. However, I mean, we're grateful that this did not escalate because, I mean, if you take by-elections and put it side by side with violence, compared to general elections and violence, by-elections will win.
Yeah, almost all the by-elections that we've had, there have been pockets of violence, some of them leading to violent attacks. Talency, I also West Wogon, just clear examples that are clear in the minds of people. And it's important that moving from here, usually the electoral process is free of violence sometimes. And also when it comes to the counting and sorting. But sometimes you get these violent activities during collation. And so we hope that the various stakeholders, including the police, will make sure that this enviable feat that we've attained will be guarded with all jealousy to make sure that for the first time in a very long time, we have a by-election without any form of serious security issues. I've listened to the NDC chairman in the afternoon who said at least to a large extent he was okay with how security has been. And he was hoping that it will be the same during the collation period. Mind you, Techiman South, the violence came during collation, and so we still have a long way to go. By now, most of the polling stations will be done with sorting out, counting, and declaring results at the polling station level, taking them to the collation center in Kumawu. And so we're hoping that there will be enough security at that place. Various stakeholders will make sure that it doesn't erupt into any bad incident. Looking at the figures, it points to the direction that the NPP is winning. It points to the direction that the NPP may be even winning more than what they had in 2020 and perhaps what they had in the polls that was done by Global Info Analytics. With that sort of lead in the election, I don't expect any form of agitations at the end of the day. What perhaps may lead to any unforeseen circumstance will be when, with all this lead, there are attempts not to make the process transparent. Because from what we've gotten from Malik Basim Talib, it tells you at the dying end of the polls, and inherently what the aim of the NDC was. The aim of the NDC is to see some sort of significant increase in their votes. And so the only way perhaps they may agitate is when the process in collating the results are not transparent enough, and there are attempts to take away what they think they may have worked for. And so this is a crucial moment so that we avoid any form of electoral violence. Again, talk about the IGP. I think the IGP has been there. The Ghana Police Service Facebook page has been streaming the various visits by the IGP and the police hierarchy to various polling centers. Hafiz has told us that there's security presence is visible within the constituency. And so we believe that with all these, we won't get into the likes of Ayahuasca West Wegon or Talency.
Musa, well, I mean, collation is yet to be concluded, final declaration yet to be made. But with respect to the conduct of the election itself and the security generally, so far so good?
I think, as your colleague mentioned, I think probably the best by-election that we've seen, violent-free. I just hope that it will be generally across everywhere, not because here NDC were expected to win. So if there's a contest, really contest, would that atmosphere be maintained? That's my worry. And I hope the police will really do the best job, whatever the elections may be, to have a peaceful election, because we need to have that.
But then all the stakeholders involved in this should be commended at least.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we saw the engagements prior to this. Police service engaging the hierarchy of both the NDC and MPP. National Peace Council in the Ashanti region also engaging both parties. The parties themselves committing to peace before, during, and after the by-election. And I think they should be commended for what we've seen so far. I mean, up until this stage, I think all stakeholders involved should be commended.
Well, let's give it to them. But I don't want to, you see, even though we indicated that stakes were high in the election, but if we're frank to ourselves, everybody knew that to a large extent, the NPP was going to win.
Yeah.
And so the NDC, even though wanted to show some bit of working, we're not going to commit that much into the election. And so we need not use Kumawu as a yardstick in saying that our arrangements when it comes to addressing security issues have been perfected. Because even the issue that happened at Oyoko, I don't think that it was handled properly. And I don't think that a presiding officer can say it was a mistake for me to have just signed. It is unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, to attend your signature is premeditated.
This is,
right?
This is not
for its level. I mean,
a presiding officer.
You know, he knows what he was doing.
He knew.
He knew what he was doing.
He knew what exactly he was doing. And you see, this is not to target.
So you see, that is why I have issues with this seeming general notion that we all knew the MPP was going to win. If it was as general and as simple as that, then there was no need for some of these antics.
No, somebody want to get 90% of the votes.
So somebody, of course, wants to get some overwhelming majority. But the point I'm saying is that if this had happened,
not through genuine means, then really,
if this had happened in a general election, in a constituency like Ododo, and we wouldn't have continued the election.
No. Clearly.
Even if you change the officer, we wouldn't
and change
have
the pin sheet itself.
We wouldn't have continued the election. Even if that happened in Ayawasu West Wogo, we wouldn't have continued the election. And so, by standard, and sometimes I think that we should uphold some of these things to the highest standards.
Yeah.
Because unlike in some jurisdictions where they have midterm elections, where you see that before the general elections, the Electoral Commission is put to test, the parties are put to test. In our case, we don't have anything like this. It's 4 years, we work into the next 4 years, we go and vote. And the saddest thing is that sometimes we wait to 3 months before the election, before the Election Security Task Force is formed.
Yeah.
There's no standing engagements throughout the 4 years on what the Election Security Task Force is expected to do. You hear from some of these groups like Peace Council and the rest, or Christian Council, about 6 months to the main election. And so when we have an opportunity like a by-election, be it sad because a certain MP has lost his life, but there's an opportunity to test our system and to hold ourselves to the highest of principles that we need to uphold ourselves to. We can't allow some of these things happen. We certainly cannot allow some of these things happen. And so I think that while we may pat ourselves on the back with what has happened with respect to a violent, free election, we need to hit the grounds running. And this matter about this presiding officer shouldn't be taken lightly. It shouldn't be taken lightly. If for nothing at all, after the election, investigation should go into it. And let's determine if indeed this presiding officer was just a genuine mistake, or he intended to do so. And even if it was a genuine mistake, is this a mistake that is acceptable by the standards of the Electoral Commission? Because the Electoral Commission spends lots of taxpayers' money in training these people. And you cannot allow them to be having some of these simple... in 2012, went to court for close to 4-6 months. Why? Because somebody didn't... Most of the instances...
Let me go to the phone lines and speak to the National Communications Officer, or Director, rather, for the New Patriotic Party, Richard Ahiagba. He's joining us via phone lines. Hello, good evening, sir. Hello. Hello, good evening. We may have lost him there, Richard Ahiagba, National Communications Director of the NPP. We're still working the lines to see if we can get him. Hello, do we have you on the line, sir? If you can hear me, kindly tell us what your observation of the exercise has been so far. Satisfactory? Hello? Unfortunately, we are still having some challenges with the lines. But Hansen, you were making your submission, if you can wrap up with that.
So the point essentially I'm making is that we need to look into this matter and say zero tolerance to some of these things. We need to insist on zero tolerance for some of these things. We cannot allow for these things to happen.
Right. Let's go back to the phone lines and speak to Richard Ahiagba now. Good evening, sir. Hello? Hello?
Yes, please.
Right. Thank you very much for joining us. So by-elections in Kumawu, voting done, collation still underway. We're expecting results from a few more polling centers. What have you made of the process, the exercise so far?
Well, the election has been very peaceful, largely peaceful. There hasn't been any events. So the estimate for me now is that it's been a very successful election. The results are coming in, and the clear indication is that the New Patriotic Party is winning very resoundingly. We've come here, we put in the work, we canvass every inch of space available, and the result is showing just the amount of work that we have put in, and we're quite happy about that.
Right. Now, the MPP over the years has enjoyed a favorable voting pattern in Kumawu. Going into this by-election, what was the plan of the party? And of course, if you had any targets, you can share that with us as well.
Well, I mean, you will see ultimately that the party did put in the work that is required to win. And so going into it, our plot was to win the election, and then we applied ourselves to that end. Going forward, we'll take stock of all the strategies that we deployed to guide our future elections and make amends where we have to. But we're quite comfortable and happy with the idea that we deployed to make sure that this victory today, probably in the next hour or so, all the results would have been compiled, and we'll see that the victory that we worked towards coming. And so therefore we'll be able to assess our strategies and then conclude how we're going to proceed in our subsequent elections. But I think that I can tell you for sure that everything that we have done, we're quite sure that will give us the result, and as the result will show that going forward, those approaches will be part of how we prosecute future elections.
Right. Now, Richard, there are some concerns have been raised by your opposing camp. One to do with an already signed declaration form by a presiding officer in one of the polling stations, and also allegations or accusations of vote buying, even during the election process. How do you respond to these allegations?
Well, I've been to several polling stations. I myself I worked at a particular polling station. I watched the processes. The NDC people were free. They came there. We all did the work the way we ought to do it. But you see, in the nature of things, we've seen that the NDC
Anytime they lose election, they will come up with these allegations of malpractice. But if you were anybody part of this election in Kumawu or observing closely, you would realize that the processes have been free and fair, and the claims of vote buying and all of that are pure allegations that have no merit as far as I know, because like I told you, I managed a polling station and there was no such thing as giving money or buying votes from people. And so it is in the nature of the NDC losing elections and coming up with very strange allegations to justify its own failure. You are witnesses to the conversation of the former General Secretary, the chairman of the NDC now, saying that they didn't have any basis to go to the Supreme Court, but they went. And when they were going, they told all of us that they had won the election and therefore they have been treated unfairly. And the outcome we have seen that in truth, they have not been they've been treated unfairly, and they know that, but then they falsely made the position to all Ghanaians that they have been mistreated, held press conferences, mischaracterized the ruling of the Supreme Court, saying that it is was a unanimous 9 or whatever name they gave them, but knowing very well that it's not true. So I cannot put anything beyond the NDC. These claims are probably the most elemental they will make. They've made more egregious claims that are not true, to the extent they went to Supreme Court knowing that they have lost the election. So I won't put anything past the NDC. So these claims are totally false, and I don't think we should give it any more airspace.
You say these claims are false, but on your part, internally, were there any attempts to stop anyone from engaging in vote buying?
Well, I just answered that question. You are just asking me the same question differently. I'm saying that there is no such thing that has happened. We came here, we worked for every vote that we got today, and we are moving on from here, going to review and ensure that our strategies are sharpened and focused for the battles ahead towards 2024. And our indication is that if you heard the president on Sunday, he says that the victory in 2024 begins in Kumawu. That's exactly what we have done, and we're going to deploy the strategies that we implemented here to guide our pursuit in 2024.
Richard, Kwakudua, one of the independent candidates, was once a party faithful. More or less, he has shown, or he has had some good showing in this particular contest. Is there any future for this individual in the NPP going forward?
Well, that will be for the party leadership to decide. The party is governed by a constitution, and as a member of the party, if he subjects himself to the rules of the party, the leadership will see if there is any space provided by the law or by a constitution to still find him a member of the party. But what it is that our laws are clear, and I'm sure Kwakudua knows about it. And so, but if he wants any redemption, I think that he would make the application, and I think the leadership will look at it if there is any room to accommodate it.
Richard Ahiagba, thank you so very much, and we wish you well.
Thank you, kindly.
Right, Richard Ahiagba there, National Communications Director of the New Patriotic Party, NPP, speaking to us from Kumawu, where really the party hierarchy has marshaled men into the constituency to ensure that whatever plan, whatever strategy, whatever targets they had will be achieved at the end of the day. Musa, you deal with the figures, the statistics, and from what we're picking up so far, are they tallying with the polling you have done? And of course, also going forward, what it speaks for elections and polling in general?
Polling certainly would evolve in this country. Sometimes we get it wrong, sometimes we get it right, but most often you should get it right. Now, if you look at what I've seen from the 65 constituencies that I've seen, Kwakudua is underperforming, and the NDC guy is overperforming.
Right.
And MPP is around 72%. That is within our margin of error of the poll that we have. Now, what might have happened is that, you see, there were people who said they would not vote, and those who said they were undecided. It's very clear that the poll, those who decided late, and those who stand up to vote when they said they would not vote, probably went to the NDC guy as a protest vote. And then those who were normally going to vote for Kukudia suddenly stick with the MPP, and that his number began to collapse from what we have seen so far. He's running third in order at the moment, and that will be a shift in the numbers. Clearly, it means that the base he had in MPP hadn't come with him this time around. They stayed with the MPP.
And perhaps I think about 20% of the NDC who said they were going to vote for others,
they didn't go where they stayed with the NDC.
They stayed with the NDC, and that might have pushed the NDC numbers up. And for the NDC, it may be a good one for them because looking at what they are seeking to achieve in this by-election.
If they should end at that range, that would be doubling their score in 2020.
Right. And Hansen, what do you make of what we have received so far? And of course, what it tells us, I understand some figures are coming in from some of the polling centers.
Yes, so we are still getting some of the results from the polling centers. The collation, we are told, is yet to begin. Papasen number 1, we are told NPP's candidate had 152 votes. NDC's Kwesi Amankwa had 19. The independent candidate had 108. Independent candidate Junior, Kwakudia Junior had 0. Rejected ballots were 2. And then Papasen number 2, NPP 150. 150. 150. NDC 23. Independent Kwakudia Senior 107. And independent Kwakudia Junior 0. Rejected ballots 3. And Pepiasi A. This is NPP 178. NDC 53. Independent Kwakudia Junior 60. Kwakudia Senior 61. And then Kwakudia Junior 1. And then Pepiasi B, NPP 171, NDC 52, and then Kwakudia Senior 58, Kwakudia Junior 0. And then we move to Anglican JHS, NPP 170, NDC 21, Independent Kwakudia Senior 1. And then Anglican Primary, NPP 202, NDC 16, Independent 1, Independent that's Kwakudia Senior 117, and Kwakudia Junior 6 votes. More will be coming in from Hafiz Tijani, who is on the grounds, but these are what the results are showing. We also have to look at the results that are coming in and where they are coming from, and where the NDC perhaps is making inroads in, and we will be able to make that analysis more when it comes to when we get the full detail of the results.
Perhaps we have an appreciation of the area, its composition. Of course, the people that inhabit these areas, then we can really make a proper analysis of the inroads that are being made by the NDC candidates.
I suspect NDC might be doing well around the Brasu, Zongo, Oyoko area.
Oyoko, yes.
And then also they might be doing well around Sechere. And also looking at potentially Ahimbo-Brano, Oyoko area. Because if you look at the polling number that came through, the MPP guy was not doing well at all in those electoral areas. So we'll be interested to see whether those numbers really are coming from where we expect them to be doing well.
Right, now let me just take us back a little bit. If Kumawu had not been split into the 3 we have now, would the results we are seeing now be any different?
No.
You're certain?
I mean, the split. So the split, one is Secha from Plains, and that is handled by the NDC currently. And so the split in itself has, in essence, rather solidified Kumawu for the NPP. If you are looking at it from the electoral map of the area, and so I don't think that the split in any way has affected the NPP's hold of Kumawu. I think it has only helped them, and now they are working towards how they can get Secha from Plains. And I think a Secha Dumasin, which these two, which are being held by the NDC. It's also bordered by the Asante Akim North, which I think is the NPP, and then close by it is the Mampong. It's Mampong, and
I think the problem MPP has in those areas is demography. The demography of the area is not necessarily the
traditional
Asantes. Yes.
Right. Well, Hafiz Tijani will be joining us soon with more results. We'll be going live to Kumawu to bring you some pictures of the counting in some of these polling stations, and of course, the final collation and declaration of the results. You'd want to stay with us here on Citi TV. Our main news bulletin, CNR, will be up at 8 p.m. and of course all the details will be on there. But let's continue with our analysis of the election in Kumawu, and this time let's look at turnout. Per the polling you did, some people opted out of voting, and from the interviews we've had so far, there's some suggestion of a low turnout. Does this marry?
Yes, but if you look at the overall number of people who said they won't vote, it's not quite high, because we saw in the poll
what percentage?
About 5% said they will not vote, and about roughly 9% said they didn't they were undecided yet. So it's not extremely high. And normally with by-elections, you don't have high turnout in by-elections. So it's not like the general elections that really see the full force of the parties being deployed. So it shouldn't be surprising if we have 50% turnout. No.
But if we should see a higher turnout, then some factors that may have occurred between Saturday and now would have contributed.
Yes.
Certainly, Kumawu would have been the place to be from Friday coming into, because everybody, and you know how our politics is, because we are sharply divided as a people between the two major political parties. Sometimes there are people who are at that very basic level of the politics who so cherish some of the people they see at the national level. And if Kumawu is bringing all these people home, you get to see all these people. Some of them see these politicians even like celebrities, and they cherish them that much. And the by-election brought all of them close to home. So, of course, if there's any form of increment in the voter turnout, then you can ascribe it to the level of, or the caliber of people who
stormed Kumawu
to
the past few days.
Try as much as possible, campaign for their respective candidates. Again, I think that the introduction of the second Kwekudia, whether significant or not, brought some form of attention to the polls. We all knew there were going to be by-elections. We all knew the date. But a lot of people also knew that it was one that the NPP was going to win. But the introduction of a Kwekudia with another, the same format with the cloth, with a skeletal dove to the right, with this, with a
very
dove
similar
to the
representation
left.
on the poster. And
It got people talking about it, and so interest, of course, may heighten there. And so if there is any form of increment in the voter turnout that could also lead to it. But we should keep in mind that when it comes to voter turnout in by-elections, generally, it is not the best. Many reasons may be ascribed to it. You know, the Ghanaian, it's as though our minds are tuned to certain events. The mind is that in 2020 we are voting. In 2024 will be 2024. And so when you speak to people within the political space, they talk about participation only when it comes to voting. When the person goes to the poll on December 7 and goes to vote for NDC or NPP, comes home. NPP is declared winner or NDC is declared winner. He joins the celebrations on the streets, comes home, and that's it.
Right.
Whatever relates to politics from 2020 December to 2024 December, he has
no participation.
He has nothing to
Zero
do with
interest.
it. Whether the government is doing debt exchange program, whether the government is going to IMF, whatever they are doing, he has nothing. He's not participating actively, but voting. So again, for me, I think that sort of mentality and that sort of attitude is in a way that any other thing that is caught in between the traditional dates for voting, you get a lot of people partaking
to it.
Again, you also look at the demography. Now, when you have people who have lived in the military eras, now these are people who cherish what it is to vote. These are people who cherish what it means for your voice to be heard. And so if you go and meet your grandmother in the village, 90 years, 96 years, they are doing Ghana card registration. She's the first person in line for Ghana card registration. You are there asking, Grandma, I say, the Ghana card. The young man who needs the Ghana card to make the phone calls and everything will sit at home, will be walking about, will never take interest. They would never take interest. And so I think, again, the demography, and today it showed. In the morning, you saw elderly women.
An actually very old woman being escorted into the booth itself to vote.
And I'm telling you, somebody will come and escort the grandma, and that person will refuse to go home. And perhaps will come back later. And so all these factors, to me, I think are at play. And so the very energetic people, the young people who do not see some of the essence of engaging in some of these activities will only be your traditional voters when it comes to the traditional dates of December 7. We are all going to vote. But for that, any other thing that happens, you would get that sort of apathy. Again, if the election, if there's a reduction or there's a low voter turnout, I don't think you can downplay the impact of apathy which may be caused by the performance of the government. In 2020, for instance, we heard from various communities whether either you build our road or we would not vote. A lot of these threats coming in. And the more the citizenry is not seeing any form of positive correlation between their involvement in politics, the people they vote for, and it translating into development, the more apathy grows. And so if I'm in a community, and when you read more about Kumawu, you get to understand that it's a very rural community. And most of these communities lack, aside road, lack basic amenities like health infrastructure, toilet facilities like educational infrastructure. And so apathy can easily grow up among some of these persons. There were video interviews of people who had gone to vote and even taken the 50 cedis, and we're still complaining that we are here every year, you don't give us jobs, it is election time, and you have come and tell us to vote. So this is even in the face of inducement. There are those
Apparently, there was no inducement.
from the director of
Communications.
He will not agree. But we've seen the videos. A reporter is on the ground. He's engaged them. I'll pick the word of Hafiz Tijani, who is on the ground, who has been with the people, over a politician.
Yeah.
It's in his best interest to tell you that there was no inducement.
Yeah.
I'm saying
but
that.
The videos say
and I'm saying that the director of